I was broke and desperate for a quick gig when I found the listing. House sitting for 2 weeks, great pay, fully stocked kitchen, no pets, no weird requests. It seemed too good to be true, and yeah, turns out it was. The house was beautiful, modern, clean, not a single speck of dust anywhere. Almost like no one actually lived there. But I wasn't about to question it. I mean, free money is free money. The owners left a simple note on the kitchen counter. "We'll be back in 2 weeks. If you need anything, call this number." Easy enough. I settled in, made myself a sandwich, and spent the first couple of days just enjoying the peace and quiet. Nothing felt off. Nothing seemed weird. But then came the third night. It was around 9 p.m. when I heard the knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just steady. I wasn't expecting anyone. The owners hadn't mentioned visitors. My stomach tightened a little, but I brushed it off. Probably just a neighbor. When I opened the door, a man stood there, maybe in his 40s, wearing a faded hoodie. His brows were furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Hey," he said, shifting awkwardly. "Sorry to bother you, but what are you doing in the Parker house?" I blinked. "The what?" "The Parker house," he repeated, tilting his head slightly. You're staying here?" "Yeah," I answered, starting to feel uncomfortable. "I'm house-sitting for the owners. They hired me for 2 weeks. That's when his face drained of color. His mouth opened like he was about to say something, then shut again. He took a small step back, eyes flicking toward the windows. "This house," he said slowly, "has been abandoned for years." I let out a short, nervous laugh. No, it hasn't. The owners just left a few days ago." He shook his head. "The Parkers died in a house fire, right here. In this house." I laughed. A short, awkward, nervous laugh. "Come on, man. That's a messed up joke." But the guy wasn't laughing. He just stared at me, eyes darting between me and the house like he expected something to happen. Then he pulled out his phone and started scrolling. "I'm not messing with you," he muttered. "Look." He turned the screen toward me. It was an old newspaper article. The headline made my stomach drop. "Tragic fire claims the lives of the Parker family." I felt the blood drain from my face. The article was dated 10 years ago. It talked about a family, Mr. and Mrs. Parker, their 2 kids, who had died when their house caught fire late one night. Investigators never figured out how the fire started, but neighbors claimed to have seen figures moving inside the house for weeks afterward. I swallowed hard. My brain kept trying to make sense of it. "No, that's impossible," I said, forcing out a weak chuckle. "I've been inside. The house is perfect. No fire damage, no—" "They rebuilt it," the man cut in. "But no one ever moved back in." I turned to look at the house. My house. The one I'd been living in for the past few days. A weird pressure settled in my chest. A weight. Like the air had suddenly gotten thicker. I needed to go back inside. I needed to think. I barely mumbled a goodbye before stepping back in and locking the door behind me. That's when I noticed the silence. Before, the house had felt normal. Now, it felt wrong. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number the owners had left me. It rang once, twice. Then, "This number is no longer in service." I stared at the screen. Tried again, same message. Something in my brain clicked. I wasn't supposed to be here. That's when I heard it. A soft creak from upstairs. My breath caught. I turned toward the staircase, my pulse hammering. I wasn't alone. I bolted. I didn't stop to grab my stuff, didn't stop to check the rooms. I just ran for the front door, threw it open, and sprinted outside like my life depended on it. The man was still there. He didn't say anything. Just stood there watching me. I didn't even care. I jumped into my car, started the engine with shaking hands, and peeled out of that driveway so fast my tires screeched. I didn't look back. I drove for miles before pulling over in an empty parking lot. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. My brain kept replaying everything: the newspaper article, the disconnected number, the sound from upstairs. What the hell had I just been staying in? After a while, I worked up the nerve to check my phone again. I tried looking up the house online, hoping to prove to myself that this was all some kind of mistake. But when I searched the address, nothing came up. No rental listings, no records of recent owners, just old reports about the Parker family and the fire. The house had never been for rent, and the people who hired me, I don't know. I don't want to know. All I know is I left half my stuff behind, and there is nothing on this earth that could make me go back for it. Because whether I was living in a haunted house or I'd been set up for something much, much worse, I wasn't supposed to leave, and somehow I did. I've stayed in a lot of houses, big ones, small ones, new and old, but this one was different. From the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. It wasn't run down, it wasn't abandoned, it was frozen, as if the family who lived there had just stepped out for a moment and never returned. The dining table was still set for dinner, plates, silverware, even a glass of water, half empty, left beside a folded napkin. Near the door, a pair of small shoes sat neatly next to a woman's heels. A newspaper lay on the sofa, its edges curled slightly like someone had set it down mid-read. The date on the front page: years ago. I tried to brush it off. Maybe the owners left in a hurry. Maybe they liked keeping the house just like this. But as I walked through the rooms, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. Something was wrong. For the first 2 days, I did my best to ignore the creeping feeling that I wasn't alone. The house was silent, but not the kind of silence that feels peaceful. It was too quiet, like something was waiting. And then, there were the noises. Soft, almost imperceptible. A chair creaking in the other room. A door clicking as if it had just moved. The faintest sound of footsteps on the wooden floor. Every time I turned around, nothing was there. At night, it got worse. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and feel it, that weight of unseen eyes on me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just an old house settling. But deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. By the third night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something wasn't right with this house. I wasn't just imagining the noises. I could feel something watching me. The weight of it, the unnatural stillness of the air, the way the temperature dropped when I stepped into certain rooms. That night, unable to sleep, I decided to explore. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself that there was nothing here. I started with the upstairs bedroom, the one that felt the coldest. The furniture was covered in dust, but the bed was perfectly made, the blankets smoothed over as if waiting for someone to crawl under them. Then I noticed the dresser. A small wooden box sat on top of it, slightly open, as if someone had just looked through it. I hesitated, then reached inside. Photographs, a thick stack, yellowed with age. I flipped through them, my fingers trembling slightly. A family of 4, a mother, a father, 2 kids. Smiling, posing in front of the house at a birthday party, playing in the yard. And then near the bottom of the pile, I found one that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of the living room, the same dining table, the same half-empty glasses, the same frozen moment in time. And in the background, me, standing there, watching. I dropped the photo like it burned me. It wasn't possible. I had never been in this house before. I had never met this family, and yet, there I was, in the background, like I had always been there. I felt lightheaded. My heart beat too loud in my ears. I needed to get out. Now. I turned to leave, and then I heard it. A whisper, low, breathless, coming from the hallway. My name. I froze. My breath came out in short, panicked gasps. Did I imagine that? Then, louder this time, closer. Come back. I bolted. I flew down the stairs, taking them two at a time, nearly tripping in my panic. But as I reached the front door, the whisper turned into a chorus, a family of voices calling my name, begging, pleading. Stay with us. I yanked the door open and ran into the night, my pulse pounding, my lungs burning, my mind screaming that I had made a mistake coming here. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if they were watching me go. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the keys. I fumbled, forced them into the ignition, and turned them so hard I thought I'd snap them in half. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of that driveway, tires skidding on the gravel road. I didn't care about my bag, my clothes, my phone charger still sitting on the nightstand. I just needed to get away. The house shrank in my rearview mirror, disappearing into the darkness. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't really gone, that it was still watching me, that they were still watching me. The whispers from that house didn't stop when I ran. They didn't fade when I locked my car doors. They followed me. For days after, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo. The frozen dining table, the child's shoes by the door, the house trapped in time, and my own shadowed figure standing in the background like I had always been there, like I was part of it. I tried telling myself that maybe the photo was a trick of the light, maybe it was just someone who looked like me, but I knew better. Because at night, when I lay in bed, far away from that house, far away from that town, I still heard them. It started as a soft murmur, just on the edge of hearing. The same whisper that had crept through that hallway, sliding into my ears like a cold breath. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, the kind of paranoia that lingers after something traumatic. But then, one night, I heard it clearly. Come back. I sat up so fast I felt dizzy. The room was dark, too dark. The air was too still. I stared into the shadows, my breath coming out in short, ragged gasps. Nothing was there. Nothing was supposed to be there. But the whisper came again. Stay with us. The exact same words they had said when I was running out of that house. I moved twice after that. Changed cities, changed jobs. I tried to leave it behind, but it never left me. No matter how far I ran, no matter how hard I tried to convince myself that it was over, the feeling never went away. I started noticing things. Objects moved in my apartment when I wasn't looking. A chair pulled out from the table, a door left open when I knew I had closed it. One night I woke up to find my closet door slightly ajar, and inside, a layer of dust, untouched, except for a single pair of small footprints, like a child had been standing there, watching. I don't talk about it, not to friends, not to family, because I know how it sounds. But if you're reading this, if you ever find yourself in a house that doesn't feel empty, where the air feels too thick, where time feels wrong, leave. Because if you don't, they might just decide you belong there too. When I took the job, the instructions were simple. Feed the cat, water the plants, take out the trash. And one more thing, never go into the basement. The old woman who hired me said it so casually, like it was just another house rule. No explanation, no warning, just a simple, don't go down there. So, of course, my curiosity kicked in immediately. The house itself was nice, old but cozy. It had that classic grandma's house feel. Floral wallpaper, worn-out wooden furniture, a faint scent of lavender that clung to the air. It felt safe, at least during the day. I spent the first afternoon lounging on the couch, scrolling through my phone and raiding the fully stocked kitchen. Easy money. But when the sun went down, the house started to feel different. The first night was quiet until around 2 a.m. I was half asleep when I heard it. A soft scraping sound. I groggily turned over, trying to ignore it. Houses settle. Pipes creak. It's normal. But then I heard something else. A whisper. I sat up, my heart suddenly pounding. The room was dark, and for a moment I thought maybe I had imagined it. But then the scraping noise came again. It was coming from below me. I swallowed hard. The basement. I forced myself to stay in bed, convincing myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But the next morning something felt off. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, and as I walked past the basement door, I noticed something. The handle looked slightly turned, like someone had tried to open it from the inside. By the second night, the noises got worse. The scraping was louder now, longer, deliberate, like something was dragging against the walls. And the whispers, they weren't just random sounds anymore. They were words. I couldn't make them out completely, but they were there, soft, faint, right beneath me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I told myself not to do it, that I should just ignore it like I had the night before. But I couldn't. I had to know. I grabbed the house key ring and crept toward the basement door. As soon as my fingers touched the handle, I hesitated. The wood felt cold, much colder than it should have been. I turned the key in the lock. The mechanism clicked. I pulled the door open. A wave of freezing air hit me. I stood there for a second, shivering, staring down into the pitch-black void. Then, gripping my phone flashlight, I stepped inside. The stairs creaked under my weight. The air was stale and heavy, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. My breath came out in short, shallow bursts as I slowly descended. And then my flashlight hit the walls. I froze. There were scratches, hundreds of them, long, jagged marks deep into the wood, crisscrossing the walls like something had been clawing to get out. Some were old and faded, but others, some looked fresh. I took a step closer, my pulse hammering. I reached out, running my fingers over the grooves. The wood was splintered, rough against my skin. Who had made these and why? Then, from behind me, so close I felt the breath on my neck, I heard it. A whisper. You shouldn't have come here. My entire body locked up. Every hair on my arm stood on end. My throat tightened. My chest felt like it had stopped working. I turned slowly. There was nothing there. But the air felt different now, thicker, heavier, like the basement itself was watching me. Then, all at once, the whisper came again, louder, closer, right in my ear. Leave. I bolted. I ran up the stairs so fast I nearly tripped, slamming the door shut behind me, my hands shaking as I turned the lock. I pressed my back against the wood, heart pounding, ears straining for any sound. Silence. But I knew. Whatever was down there, it knew I had been there. And now, it knew I had heard it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, every light in the house turned on, staring at the basement door like it might open on its own. The house was silent. Too silent. But the worst part, I felt something on the other side of that door, waiting. I don't know how to explain it, but it wasn't just fear. It was a presence. A weight in the air, pressing down on me. Like whatever was down there knew I was still here. By sunrise, I had already packed my things. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the job. I just wanted to be out. I left a note for the homeowner, something vague like, "Sorry, emergency came up. Can't stay." Then, without looking back, I walked out the front door, locked it, and drove away. I never checked the news, never asked any questions, because honestly, I don't want to know what was down there. All I know is this: I was told one thing when I took that job: never go into the basement, and I should have listened. It started with a job listing: short-term house sitting, good pay, no pets, no complicated instructions. I was skeptical. It seemed too perfect. But when I met Mr. Stevens, my concerns faded, at least for a while. He looked normal, well-dressed, polite, professional, the kind of guy you'd trust handing over your keys. "This is just a precaution," he said, handing me a set of neatly labeled instructions. "I'll be gone for 2 weeks. Just keep an eye on the place." The house itself was impressive, modern, spacious, clean, the kind of place owned by someone with money. Still, something about it felt off. Maybe it was the way Mr. Stevens barely seemed attached to it. No sentimental comments, no last-minute reminders about where things were. Just a cold, efficient handover, like he was passing off a rental property, not his home. I should have paid more attention to that. By the first night, I started noticing things. At first, it was small details. No family photos, no mess, not even a junk drawer. Every surface was perfectly staged, like a house on display. Then there was the fridge. It was stocked, sure, but every item was brand new. Unopened cartons, untouched vegetables, neatly stacked meal containers, no leftovers, no half-empty bottles. It felt like someone had prepared the house to look lived in. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized no one actually lived here. And whoever put me in this house wanted me to believe they did. By the second night, the uneasiness had settled in. At first, I tried to rationalize everything. Maybe Mr. Stevens was just an ultra-minimalist. Maybe he traveled too often to leave personal stuff lying around. Maybe he was just a little weird. But my gut kept telling me this wasn't right. The biggest thing I couldn't shake: the silence. Houses, even empty ones, have a rhythm. The hum of a fridge, the distant ticking of a clock, the occasional creak of settling wood. But this place, it was lifeless. Even the air inside felt wrong, like I wasn't in a home, but a set designed to look like one. Then there was the feeling of being watched. I caught myself checking the windows too often. Every time I looked, I expected to see something or someone staring back. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I hadn't seen any actual proof that something was wrong. That changed on the third night. I had just finished locking up for the night when I heard it. Knock. Knock, knock. I froze. It wasn't late, maybe 8 p.m., but I hadn't seen a single person near this house since I got here. No neighbors, no passing cars, nothing. I hesitated, then made my way to the door. I peeked through the peephole. A man stood outside. He looked normal. Early 40s, slightly disheveled, wearing a jacket like he'd been out in the cold for a while. But his expression, something about it unsettled me. I cracked the door open, leaving the chain on. "Can I help you?" His brows furrowed. "Yeah, what are you doing in my house?" My stomach dropped. I let out a nervous laugh. I think you're mistaken. Mr. Stevens hired me to house sit while he's away." The man's face went pale. "Who?" "Mr. Stevens," I repeated, feeling my pulse pick up. "Tall guy, nice suit? Said he'd be gone for 2 weeks." The man just stared at me. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "I've been out of town for months, and I don't know anyone named Mr. Stevens." I felt a cold, creeping sensation crawl up my spine. Something was very, very wrong. My mind went blank for a second. The words didn't make sense. I stood there, gripping the door like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The man on the porch, the real owner, was waiting for me to say something. But what was I supposed to say? I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Look, there has to be some mistake. I was hired to stay here. The man shook his head, his face unreadable. No one was supposed to be here. The way he said it, it wasn't just confusion. There was something else in his voice, something that sent a sharp chill through me. I stepped back. My instincts were screaming at me now. Then, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They matched mine. "See for yourself," he said, holding them up. "This is my house." I didn't move. I couldn't, because I finally understood. There was no Mr. Stevens. Someone had put me here, on purpose. Every nerve in my body was telling me to leave, now. I didn't know what was going on, but I wasn't about to stick around and find out. I swallowed hard and forced out, I need to grab my things." The man narrowed his eyes but didn't say anything. He just watched me. I closed the door, locked it, and ran upstairs. Think. I grabbed my bag, my phone, my wallet, anything I could get my hands on. I tried calling Mr. Stevens, but of course, the number was disconnected. I should have expected that. I looked around one last time. The house, so perfect, so staged, suddenly felt suffocating. I grabbed the doorknob and I froze. Outside, the man was still there, just standing at the end of the driveway, watching, waiting. For what? I didn't want to know. I bolted, didn't look at him, didn't try to explain, just ran straight to my car, threw my bag inside, and started the engine. As I sped off, I stole one last glance at the house, and I saw something that made my stomach twist into a knot. In one of the upstairs windows, there was someone else. A shadowed figure, standing there, watching. I didn't stop driving for hours. I didn't call the police. What would I even say? I just wanted to forget. But I couldn't. I still don't know who set me up. I don't know what they wanted. And the worst part, I don't know if they found someone else. When I took this job, I thought it was going to be the easiest gig ever. Watch some Netflix, feed the dog, sleep in a big, comfy bed. Easy money. The house was nice too. Modern, clean, huge windows that gave a perfect view of the snowy forest outside. A little too quiet, maybe, but I figured I'd get used to it. The only weird thing? It was completely isolated. No neighbors, no streetlights, just a long driveway leading to an empty road. But hey, I wasn't complaining. The first night was chill. I made some popcorn, put on a horror movie, bad choice in hindsight, and relaxed on the couch. No strange noises, no eerie feelings, nothing. But when I woke up the next morning and looked outside, there were footprints in the snow. At first, I wasn't too freaked out. Maybe a lost hiker, a delivery guy, someone random who passed by. But then I looked closer. The footprints came from the woods, went straight up to the living room window and just stopped. No returning steps, no side tracks, just a single path leading to the glass and nowhere else. That was weird, but I still shrugged it off. Maybe the wind had covered the rest of the tracks. Maybe I was overthinking it. That night, I locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to more footprints. This time, they led to my bedroom window. Okay, now I was officially creeped out. The first set of footprints? Weird, but whatever. The second set? Yeah, no. That's not normal. Someone or something was coming up to the house at night, watching. But here's the thing, I never heard anything. No knocking, no footsteps, no doors creaking. Just silence. I needed to know what was going on. So I set up my phone on the windowsill with the motion detector on. If anything moved outside, it would start recording. I told myself I was being paranoid, that in the morning I'd check the video and see nothing. That night, I fell asleep faster than expected. Maybe because I was exhausted. Maybe because I just didn't want to think about it. But the next morning, I checked my phone, and at 3 a.m. the motion detector had gone off. I hit play. The screen was dark at first, just the soft glow of moonlight reflecting on the snow. Nothing moved. Then a shadow, tall, still, standing right at my window. It didn't walk up, it didn't shift or turn, it was just there, watching. My breath caught in my throat. I turned up the volume, but the only sound was the faint wind outside. Then I noticed something worse, the footprints in the snow. They were already there when the shadow appeared, meaning it had been standing there before the motion sensor even detected it. I felt sick. I didn't even finish watching the video. I grabbed my stuff, threw it into my bag, and made one decision. I wasn't staying another night. I didn't waste any time. I threw my bag over my shoulder, grabbed my keys, and headed straight for the front door. But as soon as I reached for the handle, I hesitated. A feeling I couldn't explain crawled up my spine, like something was waiting for me outside. I swallowed hard and peeked through the window. The snow was untouched, no new footprints. For a second, I almost convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, this was all in my head. That maybe the video was just a glitch. That I'd step outside and feel like an idiot for overreacting. But then, something caught my eye. Out in the distance, near the tree line, a shape. It wasn't moving, it wasn't clear, but it was there, watching. That was enough for me. I bolted, opened the door, ran to my car, and jumped in, locking the doors so fast my hands nearly fumbled the keys. The engine roared to life. My tires spun against the ice as I sped down that long, empty driveway, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't look back. I never told the homeowners what happened. Just sent them a text saying something came up and I couldn't finish the job. I didn't check the news, didn't call the cops, I just let it go. But I never deleted the video. Sometimes, late at night, I force myself to watch it again. I pause it at 3 a.m., staring at that shadow standing at my window, and every time I ask myself the same question: what would have happened if I had opened the curtains? I don't think I want to know. I've done a lot of house-sitting jobs, but this one felt different from the start. The couple who hired me were nice enough, older, polite, grateful that I could stay while they were away for the week. They walked me through the house, pointed out the basics, the spare keys, the Wi-Fi password, where they kept the extra blankets. And then, just as they were about to leave, the wife hesitated. "Oh, one more thing," she said, glancing at her husband. "Whatever you do, don't move the doll." I let out a nervous chuckle, waiting for them to say it was a joke. They didn't. Instead, they both looked at me with serious expressions. "It stays in the rocking chair," the husband added. "Just leave it alone." I nodded, not really knowing what else to say. But as soon as they left, I went straight to the living room to see what kind of doll needed its own seat in the house. And the moment I saw it, my stomach twisted. It was old, Victorian style. Dressed in a pale lace dress, its face cracked in places, its glassy eyes too bright under the dim lighting. I don't know what it was, but something about it felt wrong. I decided right then that I'd be avoiding the living room as much as possible. The first night I stayed upstairs, kept the TV on, and did my best not to think about the doll. I wasn't scared exactly, just uneasy. By midnight, I was in bed, bundled under the covers, trying to sleep. That's when I heard it. A whisper. I sat up immediately, my heart pounding. At first, I thought it was the wind. The house was old and old houses made noises. But then I heard it again, soft, murmuring, coming from downstairs. I held my breath, listening. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. It was coming from the living room. My mind raced. Maybe the TV had turned back on, maybe the neighbors, but I knew the truth. I didn't want to go downstairs. I didn't want to see if the doll was still sitting in that chair, so I did the only thing I could. I pulled the blanket over my head, squeezed my eyes shut, and pretended I hadn't heard a thing. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. I told myself I had imagined it. Old houses creak, wind makes noises. I was just overthinking things. But the moment I stepped into the living room, my stomach dropped. The rocking chair was still, but the doll, it wasn't sitting in the chair anymore. It was on the floor, lying on its side, its glassy eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. I froze. I hadn't touched it. I knew I hadn't touched it. A shiver crawled up my spine as I stared at it. Maybe it had fallen. Maybe the chair rocked during the night. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Taking a shaky breath, I bent down, carefully picked it up, and put it back in the chair. The whole time, I felt this weird pressure in the air, like I was doing something I wasn't supposed to do. I stepped back, watching it for a second. The house was silent. Nothing moved. I turned and left the room, closing the door behind me. But all day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, I locked the living room door before heading to bed. I wasn't taking any chances. I barely slept. Every little noise had me on edge. Then, sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up with a jolt. Something was wrong. I lay there, listening, my heart hammering. And then I heard it, a slow creaking sound. My breath caught, the rocking chair. I knew that sound, even though I didn't want to. The chair was moving. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was my imagination. Then, tap. A light, deliberate knock coming from downstairs. Nope, no way. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, my hands shaking. I had to check. I had to see. I tiptoed to the stairs, my heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. As I reached the bottom step, I turned the corner and stopped cold. The living room door was open. I had locked it. I knew I had locked it. And in the dim glow from the street light outside, I could see it. The rocking chair, moving, slowly, back and forth. Empty. The doll wasn't there. My whole body froze. The rocking chair creaked softly, its motion unnatural, like someone had just been sitting there. But the doll was gone. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I should have run. I should have grabbed my things and bolted, but something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe stubbornness, made me take a step closer. That's when I saw it. The doll was on the floor again, but this time it wasn't in the same place as before. It was closer, facing the stairs, facing me. I felt a horrible, crawling sensation spread through my chest. Like the air itself had turned heavier, pressing down on me. I wanted to believe, desperately, that I had somehow knocked it over. But I knew the truth. It moved on its own. Then, I heard it. A whisper right behind me. Not words, just a low, breathy murmur, like something trying to speak but unable to form words. I turned so fast I nearly fell. Nothing was there. That was it. That was my breaking point. I grabbed the doll, shoved it back into the chair, hands shaking, stomach twisting, and I ran upstairs. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, back pressed against the wall, watching the door, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. At sunrise, I grabbed my bag and left the house without looking back. I didn't tell the owners what happened. I didn't ask any questions, and I will never, ever babysit a doll again. I've been house-sitting for years. I've stayed in all kinds of places, big old mansions, sleek modern apartments, even cabins in the middle of nowhere. By now, I know every sound a house can make. Pipes creak, floors shift, the wind sneaks through cracks in the windows. None of it bothers me anymore. That's why, when I got the job to watch over a 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, I didn't think twice. The owners were a nice couple going on vacation, and they left me a long list of instructions: when to water the plants, what food I could eat, and even which neighbors I could call in case of an emergency. It was an easy gig. The first night was completely normal. I made dinner, watched some TV, and went to bed. The house was quiet. No weird noises, no bad vibes. Just another job. But then came the second night. I woke up at around 2 a.m. to a sound. A soft, slow creaking. Not the kind a house makes when it settles. This was different. It was coming from above me. I lay there for a second, my brain still foggy from sleep, trying to make sense of it. Probably just the wind, I thought. Or maybe a rat in the attic. It wouldn't be the first time I'd dealt with that. The sound didn't last long and I was too tired to care. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning, though, something felt off. As I was making coffee, I noticed something unusual. The attic door was slightly open. Now, here's the thing. I hadn't even touched that door. And attic doors don't just open on their own. I stared at it for a moment, feeling that uneasy knot in my stomach, but I shook it off. Maybe it had been like that the whole time and I just hadn't noticed. Still, something about it didn't sit right with me. By the third night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had gone to bed like usual, trying to convince myself that the attic door situation was nothing. Maybe the house had a slight draft, or maybe the latch was loose. I kept telling myself there was a logical explanation. But then, at around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Soft footsteps. Not the random creaks of an old house, not the scurrying of a rat. These were slow, deliberate steps, coming from right above me. My heart started pounding. I lay completely still, my ears straining, my breath shallow. Someone or something was up there. I forced myself to move, slipping out of bed as quietly as possible. My brain was racing. What do I do? Call the police? What if it was nothing? What if I looked like an idiot? Instead, I grabbed the sharpest knife I could find from the kitchen and a flashlight. I stood at the attic door, hesitating. My hand was on the pull cord, my pulse hammering. Every instinct in me screamed, "Don't do it." But I had to know. I yanked the cord. The attic door creaked open. I pointed the flashlight up and climbed the ladder, my breath shallow, my grip tight on the knife. The attic was empty. No people, no animals, nothing. But then my flashlight landed on something in the corner. A mattress. A dirty, thin mattress. Next to it was a half-eaten sandwich, still sitting on a crumpled fast food wrapper. A blanket was folded nearby. My entire body went cold. Someone had been living up here, and they had been watching me. I froze, my mind struggling to process what I was looking at. This wasn't just some abandoned attic with old junk. Someone had been here recently. That sandwich wasn't rotting, which meant whoever was staying here had been here in the last day or two. Or worse. They were still here. My skin crawled. I swung the flashlight around, scanning every dark corner, every shadow. No one. But I felt it. The weight of unseen eyes, the sickening realization that I had been watched this whole time. I bolted. I practically jumped down the attic ladder, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the knife. I grabbed my phone and ran outside, dialing 911. I stood on the sidewalk, my breath coming in short gasps as I kept my eyes locked on the attic window. Was someone up there right now, peering down at me? The cops arrived fast. They went inside, weapons drawn, searching every inch of the attic and the house. They didn't find anyone, but they found proof. Footprints in the dust, empty food wrappers, a makeshift hiding spot behind a stack of boxes. Someone had been living there. One of the officers shook his head. "You'd be surprised how often this happens," he said. "People break into homes, stay hidden for weeks or even months without the owners ever noticing." That sent a shiver through me. They never caught whoever it was. I didn't go back inside. The police finished their search, asked me a few more questions, and eventually left. They assured me that the house was clear, but that didn't matter. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, he, was still watching. I packed my things in record time and left that house for good. For days I kept checking the news, half expecting to hear that they had finally caught someone. But nothing ever came up. No arrests, no updates, no answers. The family who owned the house never had any problems after that, at least none that they told me about. Maybe whoever it was had moved on, found another attic, another house. But even now, years later, I still think about it. I think about how long he was up there before I noticed. I think about how many times I must have walked right past him without realizing. And worst of all, I wonder if, on those nights when I was sleeping soundly in that quiet house, he was awake, watching me.